The glow of my laptop was the only light in my apartment as I typed the last notes into the presentation deck. For months, I had been living on caffeine, takeout boxes, and the relentless hum of my own determination. Etherlink wasn't just another project at Halden and Rhodes Consulting. It was my lifeline, a system that could redefine defense logistics and bring $25 million to the firm. But more than numbers, it was mine. Every sleepless night, every algorithm tweaked until my eyes blurred, every silent dawn when the city outside still slept, I had poured all of it into this idea. I leaned back in my chair and rubbed my temples, remembering the first time I'd sketched the routing model on a diner napkin after midnight. Now it had evolved into a polished system capable of surviving any disruption in a supply chain. I thought of my father, who'd once warned me never to let anyone diminish the worth of my work. Tonight, I believed he would be proud. When I finally hit save and watched the timestamp confirm the last version, it was nearly 5 a.m. I stood at my window and looked down at Boston's financial district, its towers of glass catching the first gray light of dawn. Inside those buildings, reputations were made and destroyed in a heartbeat. Today, I told myself, would be the day mine was secured. By 7, I was dressed in a navy blazer, my flash drive tucked safely in my bag. The office was still half asleep when I arrived, its sterile hallways humming faintly with fluorescent light. I printed out the handouts, smoothed the pages, and whispered under my breath, "This is it. Cassia." No more waiting for someone else to notice. As I reached for my phone to check the time, the screen lit up with a new message. It was from Victor Halden. Short, blunt. "You're not needed." The words burned into me, sharp and cold. My throat tightened as I read them again, hoping I'd misread, but there it was, a dismissal in 3 words. I stood frozen in the empty corridor, the handouts trembling in my grasp, as the realization sank in that Victor intended to step into the spotlight alone. I stood just outside the conference room, the cold glass separating me from the stage I had built for myself, but wasn't allowed to step onto. Inside, Victor Halden was in his element, shaking hands with the executives from Cillian Technologies, as though he had personally bled for every line of code and every projection in the deck under his arm. My deck. The screen flickered to life, and my stomach dropped. The title slide no longer read Etherlink. It read Nexus Path. The name I had chosen, tied to the history that inspired me, was gone without a trace. Victor spoke with rehearsed authority. After years of studying defense logistics, I developed this adaptive routing system to revolutionize supply chain resilience. Every word was mine. He clicked through the slides I had agonized over, pointing at data models I had tested until 2 a.m, explaining projections I had built down to the decimal, but on the slides, my name had vanished, replaced with his. One of the executives asked about the technical team behind the system. Victor smiled and waved his hand dismissively. A few junior support staff helped with documentation. Junior support. That was me 10 years of strategy, 3 months of sleepless nights, erased with 2 words. My throat burned as I pressed my palm against the glass, trying to steady myself. When he explained the origin of Nexus Path, I nearly laughed from the absurdity. He claimed the name came from his fascination with creating paths of connection, a hollow line, slick but empty. And the executives nodded as if he had just gifted them wisdom. Applause filled the room when he finished, and the sound seeped through the glass like an insult. They were clapping for him, for his brilliance, for his theft. I stood invisible, the architect of everything, left to watch someone else bask in the glow I had earned. Victor stepped forward to shake hands, his smile broad and triumphant, while I turned away from the glass, my fists tight, already calculating what it would take to fight back. Back in my Cambridge apartment, the adrenaline of rage had cooled into something sharper, steadier. I set my bag on the floor, opened my laptop, and began digging through the digital bones of Etherlink. Every email I had sent to update progress, every draft with timestamp saves, the early patent filing I had submitted months ago as a precaution, even the voice memos from late-night meetings where Victor asked me questions so basic it was clear he had no grasp of what I was building. One by one, I gathered them into folders, labeling each with meticulous care. My fingers moved quickly, but my breathing stayed slow, even. Proof had to be more than emotion. It had to be undeniable. But when I logged onto the company's server to retrieve a file from March, my stomach lurched. Entire directories were missing. Documents I knew I had uploaded, reports I had shared in team drives gone. The realization hit hard. I had scrubbed them. Whether at Victor's request or some automated purge, the trail inside the firm was being erased. For a moment, fear twisted in my chest. If I hadn't saved copies, the record of my authorship would vanish. Then I remembered the external hard drive I kept in a locked drawer, the nightly habit of syncing my drafts to a personal cloud. I pulled it out, connected it, and there they were, unaltered, intact, time-stamped. My insurance against exactly this kind of betrayal. Relief settled into determination. I created a new encrypted folder, uploaded every scrap of evidence, and labeled it insurance. It was the first time in days I allowed myself to breathe fully. When the apartment finally went quiet, the glow of the monitor fading, I sat by the window. My father's face came back to me, tired, defeated when his invention had been stolen by men with more money and louder voices. He had warned me once, "Don't let them take what you built." Cassia. I clenched my fists, the city lights reflecting in the glass. I would not let history repeat. This time, the story would end differently, and I would be ready for the fight ahead. The night after I built the insurance folder, sleep wouldn't come. My mind kept circling the same thought evidence meant little if no one would look at it. Victor was a partner, well-connected, practiced at turning any accusation into team collaboration. I needed someone outside his reach. My fingers hovered over my phone before I finally dialed the number I hadn't used in years. Dr. Strathmore. My voice cracked slightly. "Cassia Moreau," she said warmly, as though no time had passed. What's happened, I poured it out. How Victor had pushed me aside, renamed my project, stolen my voice in front of Cillian Technologies. She stayed quiet, letting me speak until my throat ached. When I finished, there was only the sound of her steady breathing. "Elowen," I whispered, "I've kept everything. Drafts, patents, recordings. But inside the firm, I don't matter. He'll bury me before I'm heard." There was a pause, then a soft sigh. "Cassia, you're not the first." "Do you know why I left academia?" I shook my head, though she couldn't see me. My name was erased from a project I led for 4 years. A man with louder credentials signed his name over mine. I swore I would never let it happen again to me or to someone I could protect. Her voice steadied into something firm. "I consult now. And yes, Cillian Technologies is one of my clients. Their CEO values integrity more than smooth pitches." A strange current of hope stirred in me. "You know Dorian Keats, I do," she said. "And he trusts me." Cassia. Sometimes you don't need to storm the gates. Sometimes one well-timed question collapses the whole facade. All you need is to be ready with the answer. Her words landed like a spark in dry grass. Maybe I couldn't outshout Victor, but I could outlast him. I pressed the phone to my ear, the first hint of calm washing over me. If one question could unravel everything, then I would prepare for that moment with everything I had. When I walked back into the office, I kept my head down, clutching my folder of handouts that had never been used. The halls buzzed with talk of Victor's flawless presentation. Maura Quinlan, the junior analyst assigned to assist me months ago, intercepted me near the break room. "I heard what happened," she said, lowering her voice. "Victor can be ruthless. I'm sorry, Cassia. You didn't deserve that." Her eyes were wide with concern, her tone almost gentle. For a moment, I let myself believe she meant it. But that afternoon, Victor barged into my office, his jaw tight, his voice low and cutting. "I know what you're doing," he hissed, digging through old files, pulling drafts. "HR will never side with you. You developed this on company time, with company data. It belongs to us." To me, he leaned closer, his cologne sharp and suffocating. "If you want a future here, stop this nonsense. Be a team player." Then he walked out, leaving the echo of his threat behind. I sat frozen, fury burning through my chest. Someone had told him. The only person who knew I'd been combing through old records was Maura. My stomach sank. Sympathy on her face, betrayal in her silence. Later that week, I caught the mistake she didn't realize she had made. A memo she'd sent to a client contact, meant to summarize deliverables, included a line about Etherlink's adaptive routing. She must have pulled it from one of my old drafts. She'd used the original name without noticing. When I read it, my pulse quickened. Proof of authorship had slipped through the cracks, not from my hand, but from hers. If Cillian saw Etherlink and questioned its origin, Victor's entire rebranding could unravel. I printed the memo quietly, slid it into my folder of evidence, and locked it away. Maura thought she had tipped the balance against me. She didn't realize she had just given me something far more valuable, a witness, even if unwilling, to the truth Victor had tried to bury. 2 days later, I boarded the early train to New York with a folder pressed tight against my chest. Alawan had insisted on arranging the meeting herself, choosing a quiet cafe far from the towers of Midtown. The place smelled of roasted beans and worn leather, the kind of spot no executive would be expected to frequent. That was exactly the point. Dorian Keats arrived precisely at 7:30. He wasn't what I had imagined. No polished arrogance, no sweeping gestures, just a tall man in a dark coat who ordered a black coffee and sat across from me as though we were equals. "Alawan speaks highly of you," he said. His eyes were steady, but there was no warmth in them yet. "She doesn't make those endorsements lightly. Tell me what happened." My hands trembled as I slid the folder across the table. Drafts with timestamps, patent filings, the audio recording where Victor had asked, "What is Etherlink again?" I forced myself to meet his gaze as I explained how the project had been stripped of my name, reborn as Nexus Path, and paraded as Victor's brainchild. Keats opened the folder, skimming with the precision of someone who had done this before. Finally, he closed it and rested his hands on top. "You should know," he said. "I once signed a contract with a company that promised innovation. They delivered stolen work. It cost me a fortune and nearly my reputation. I don't forgive theft lightly." My breath caught. "So you believe me?" "I believe the evidence," he corrected. His tone was clipped, deliberate. "And the evidence points clearly to you." I exhaled, the air shaky in my lungs. Keats leaned closer, lowering his voice. "At the final meeting, I'll ask one question, only one. Be ready with the truth, and don't flinch. Sometimes that's all it takes to bring a liar down." I nodded, clutching my coffee for steadiness. For the first time since this nightmare began, the path forward wasn't just survival, It was a chance to reclaim what was mine, if I had the courage to answer when the moment came. The conference room at Cillian's Manhattan headquarters gleamed with chrome and glass, its walls reflecting back a version of me that looked calm, but felt anything but. Victor commanded the table, his voice smooth, his gestures practiced. Slide after slide of my work lit the screen as he spoke with authority, claiming ownership of every insight, every number I had built. I sat along the side wall, my notepad open but useless. Victor hadn't shared the file with me. The presentation was password protected. I was here only for show, the silent technical support in case he stumbled. My nails dug into the paper as he breezed through the adaptive routing model. My model, with a confidence that made even the smallest nods of approval from the executives sting like a fresh wound. As he reached the closing section, the tension in my chest became unbearable. He smiled at the room, certain of his triumph. That was when Dorian Keats leaned back, folding his hands as if the question had just occurred to him. Before we sign, he said casually, I have one question. Where did the name Etherlink come from? The silence that followed was sharper than any blade. Victor's smile faltered. Well, the name. It was just a working title. Nothing significant. His voice cracked slightly, the rhythm broken. He looked down at his papers as though the answer might be hiding there. Keats tilted his head. Interesting. We were told it had a very specific origin. His eyes flicked toward me. Steady. Deliberate. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, but my voice was clear when I spoke. It's named after the 1962 Hawk supply line in Alaska. During the Cold War, only autonomous carriers survived the conditions. I built the system's routing logic on that model. That's why it's called Etherlink, a link forged to endure where others failed. The room was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence. Executives exchanged glances, their earlier certainty shaken. Victor's face had gone pale, his fingers drumming against the table with nervous force. The balance in the room had shifted, and for the first time, it tilted toward me. When I returned to Boston, the air in the office felt charged, brittle. Victor wasted no time striking back. Within hours of the Manhattan meeting, whispers began threading through the cubicles, claims that I had lifted concepts from rival firms, that Etherlink was never original, that I had built on stolen work. He was careful. Of course. The rumors never came directly from him. They slipped out through allies, echoed in break-room chatter, repeated just enough times to sound like fact. I caught two associates staring at me in the elevator, lowering their voices the moment I stepped in. My name, once ignored, was suddenly everywhere but in the ugliest way possible. I kept my head down, answering emails, focusing on client reports as though nothing had changed. Outward calm was my only shield, though inside I burned. Then, a twist I hadn't expected. One afternoon, I received a formal notice the firm's compliance department was opening an internal audit into the Cillian project, standard procedure. The memo read, but the timing was too sharp to be coincidence. Victor strutted through the halls as if he had triggered the review himself. Yet in meetings, I noticed his hands tremble slightly when flipping pages. He barked orders more harshly than usual, snapping at assistants, even at Mora. The cracks in his composure widened daily. Meanwhile, whispers began to shift. Some colleagues who had overheard fragments of the Manhattan meeting started asking quiet questions. What really happened in New York, one analyst murmured to me in the stairwell. Another leaned in near the printer Keats asked about the name. Didn't he? I heard Victor froze. The rumors Victor had planted were colliding with the truth leaking out from those who had witnessed the slip, and compliance was pulling records Victor could no longer alter: the missing files, the doctored slides, the discrepancies in his timelines. I said nothing. I let the silence do its work. The same silence that had once erased me, only now it carried weight, a pressure Victor could not control. By the end of the week, his smile had thinned into something closer to a grimace. The boardroom was empty except for Victor when I walked in, a thick manila envelope in my hand. He sat at the head of the table, arms spread wide as though the polished wood still belonged entirely to him. His smile was sharp, but his eyes flickered with something I hadn't seen before: wariness. "You wanted to meet?" he asked, pretending at casual authority. "Yes," I said simply, sliding the envelope across the table. He opened it with an almost theatrical flourish, as if expecting an apology or a stack of technical notes to prop up his failing case. But as the first page caught his eye, the color drained from his face. My resignation letter lay on top. Beneath it, the official contract termination notice from Cillian Technologies addressed to Halden and Rhodes. His fingers trembled as he flipped through the rest my new employment agreement, naming me Chief Innovation Officer of the Etherlink Division, with full intellectual property rights assigned to me. "You can't," he muttered, his voice thin, then louder, ragged. "You can't do this. This is theft. This is corporate espionage. I'll sue you. I'll sue Cillian." This was my deal. I met his outburst with steady calm. "It was never your deal, Victor. It was my work. And they'd rather build Hawkline with the person who actually created it." His hand slammed the table, the sound echoing against the glass walls. "You'll regret this," he spat. "You're burning every bridge in this industry." I stood, adjusting the strap of my bag across my shoulder. "No," I said softly. "I'm building something stronger than bridges." As I reached the door, I paused, meeting his furious eyes one last time. "Next time, Victor, try inventing something of your own." The door clicked shut behind me, sealing the boardroom in silence. My footsteps down the corridor were steady, each one carrying me further from the shadow of his power and closer to the life I had chosen for myself. The months that followed moved quickly, each day reshaping the life I thought I had lost. My name now hung on the glass door of a corner office at Cillian's headquarters in Manhattan, Cassia Moreau. Chief Innovation Officer. The skyline stretched beyond the windows, a reminder of how far I had come since that morning Victor told me I wasn't needed. My team had grown to 40, a mix of sharp graduates and seasoned analysts. Among them was Maura Quinlan. She had arrived one morning, eyes downcast, resignation letter from Halden and Rhodes still in her hand. "I believed him once," she admitted quietly, "but not anymore. I want to do this the right way." I gave her a desk and a chance to start again. We rebuilt Etherlink stronger and cleaner than before. Clients came not only for the product, but for the culture we fostered: transparency, credit where it was due, innovation with integrity. It felt like breathing fresh air after years of holding my breath. The industry summit that spring was the first time I spoke publicly about anything since leaving Halden and Rhodes. My session was titled Innovation and Integrity. I stood on the main stage, the lights hot on my face, and told the room, great ideas don't just change industries, they test our character. Protecting them is as important as creating them. The applause that followed wasn't for showmanship. It carried a weight I had never felt before. During the Q&A, a young engineer raised her hand. "How did you survive losing credit for your work?" she asked. I smiled. "I didn't lose it. I protected it." Credit isn't something you beg for, it's something you defend with proof, patience, and the truth. Later, back in my office, I looked out at the city and let the thought settle. The greatest revenge had never been about destroying Victor or watching Halden and Rhodes stumble. It was about building something so enduring, so undeniable, that their lies evaporated on their own. I had risen high enough that his theft was no longer part of my story, only my beginning.